Thank you. Well, we're gonna kick this off, and thank you for joining us. Thanks to the tax conference for giving us the opportunity to discuss about technologies today. We heard a lot of talks in the morning about drugs and precision medicine, and we thought it would be a good idea to also discuss what's the role of the medical technologies and diagnostic and digital health in a space that's changing very fast. And today with me, I'm Diana Saraceni from Panakès. Sayan is kindly accepted to join, and I will ask to start and kick off the round of introduction.
Thank you so much, Anna. Can you all hear me? I guess so. Hi, I'm Shaheen Bhattacharya. I'm an executive director at JP Morgan in the investment banking division. I cover medtech and diagnostics companies in Europe. Thank you to the S.A.S Forum for inviting me. And I go to Camilla to introduce.
Super. Thanks for the introduction and for having me here. So I'm Camilla. I'm CEO of Oxford Medical Products. I'm originally a veterinary surgeon. I moved into sort of biotech, medtech startup ecosystem in Oxford about 11 years ago now. I joined Oxford Medical Products, OMP, back in 2019. And we have created a non-pharmacological, non-surgical intervention for weight loss and obesity. So we have developed a copolymer hydrogel pill that when you swallow it, it swells rapidly in your stomach to about the size of a golf ball, where it's able to suppress appetite mechanically. So essentially you fill your stomach up with these hydrogels, they stay for several days, they reduce your appetite, they then pass out naturally, and you can continue redosing to sustain that appetite suppression 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's our lead asset. We've just completed a phase 2A study in that. And actually, we've just launched a gastrointestinal drug delivery platform, really utilizing that technology in order to maintain those drugs in the stomach environment and elute them over a 24-hour period.
Claude, please.
Hi, I'm Claude Cohen-Bacrie. I have been working in the field of ultrasound imaging for the last 30 years. I used to be in charge of research for ultrasound at Philips, based in the US. I came back to France. I obviously have a French accent. In 2005, I created the first ultrasound company addressing mainstream radiology. And we discovered when I did that first company that quantitative imaging was a way to democratize the use of ultrasound. As a matter of fact, you no longer need to have image interpretation skills to use ultrasound. And that's why after that first company called Supersonic Imagine, I created another one, which is the one I represent today, which is called E-Scopics. And what we basically did with E-Scopics, even though it was not obvious, was to transform ultrasound imaging into a pure software. So the only thing you need to do ultrasound now is a probe that you can take with you. And the software runs on a PC or on a tablet, and the computer becomes an ultrasound system that you can actually use for screening of diverse chronic disease. And obviously the first disease that we target is MASH, estimating fibrosis content and steatosis content in the liver with an exam of a portable ultrasound system. So that's what we do at E-Scopics.
And Shaheen, please.
Great, excellent. Hi, Shaheen Lakhan. I'm from Boston. I'm the Chief Scientific and Medical Officer for a company called Click Therapeutics, like a mouse click. We are a venture-backed biotech backed by the likes of Sanofi Ventures, HIG, and F Prime Capital. What is our medicine? It's actually software. So everyone's pretty much in their pocket, or hopefully you're not on it right now, but it's this smartphone. And so we deliver applications that are our medicine that treat diseases, including in the cardiometabolic space. We have 2 FDA cleared applications, one for type 2 diabetes, another in partnership with Otsuka Pharmaceuticals for major depressive disorder, and 3 breakthrough designations across multiple indications. I'm excited today because we've discussed a lot about the challenges of these anti-obesity medications. Hopefully I can offer some solutions that add 0 safety risk, which is software plus drug combinations.
Thank you. So just before we kick off the discussion, Sayan and myself will be co-chairing the panel, but we'll also be very actively responding to the question that we're going to share. I didn't introduce myself. I'm a founding partner at Panakès. We are a venture capital company managing about 300 million, investing primarily in medical technologies, but also in therapeutics. Primarily all over Europe, but with companies as well in the US as well. And we do seed to late stage and up to 10 million. We have not done an investment in obesity technologies yet, but we're very interested in monitoring a space that is changing quite fast. So let's maybe kick off the discussion with a first very more open question. And I will ask with you, Sayan, because it's about what do you think in terms of segments are the most attractive segments for from a pure investment standpoint in the space? Do you want to take it or?
Sure, happy to. Well, no question like the first one, right? So I'll take the difficult one for sure. The space when a couple of years ago or 3 years ago was sort of underrepresented, although the opportunity is quite significant and people did recognize that. But I genuinely think that the moment is now to get into the space. I think the opportunity is quite massive. I did see some very large TAM numbers earlier in the panels, which is true, and completely agree. Obviously, we have a stellar set of panelists talking about different things and approaching the market in various ways. I genuinely think that parts which are very interesting is obviously screening. I think that's becoming quite important because there's a limitation to manufacturing of some of the GLP-1 products, but also there's an understanding as well from the masses and from the public at large about the importance of obesity in general. Then there is obviously diet monitoring, management, where I think, Camilla, your company does come in a little bit. There's obviously detection, and then there's obviously software for various related challenges. So maybe we start off with Shaheen to sort of go on, and then we come to Camilla, and then Claude perhaps on point of care diagnostics, perhaps. Yeah.
Sure, that works for me. So pretty much what we create are software enhanced drugs. So these are drugs combined with our mobile applications that are FDA cleared. And the FDA actually recently issued a guidance just around a year ago that whatever the clinical benefit that's gained from the software or mobile application can actually go back into the drug label. And that could be on efficacy, safety, tolerability, adherence, expanded indications inclusive. When you talked about the continuity of the patients, I do believe that digital therapeutics can play a role in even patient selection, pre-prescription. I happen to be a neurologist and still see patients, and I think we could obviously segment the right patient for the right combination of drugs based on the multitude of factors, right? Some of them are patient-specific preferences, tolerability profiles, what their past experiences have been, and what motivates them, essentially. Not everyone takes one of these drugs with the same motivations. Even though your doctor wants good body composition, reducing your full comorbidity burden and everything else, not every patient wants that, and you have to meet them with these solutions. When you co-prescribe it, a lot of the challenges you've learned is during the titration period. And we always have this adage in medicine, right? You prescribe, go low, and go slow, but you prescribe to effect as tolerated, and everyone has a unique tolerance profile. If you had a smartphone application that measured your tolerance profile, you inform it, it informs the titration of your drug. That's a closed loop system. And that's one that's patient empowered and no additional burdensome on the practitioner, the healthcare clinic, the medical assistants, everything of that nature. And then even afterwards, in your experience, a lot of people take drug holidays. Hey, they want to relive their joy for food, for instance, or unintentionally they get cycled off to medication, access issues, payment issues. Well, the application can exist without the drug. And then that's a whole platform for longitudinal data collection.
We'll come to compliance and patient engagement later, but do you guys want to advocate on like other areas of that are particularly interesting and new markets created? I think, Claude, you have a completely new market given recent drug approval, right? That maybe did not exist at all on the NASH side.
Yeah, I think what we realized, and we realized that when I was in my previous company targeting radiologists, is that the use of tools to screen and to monitor patient has to move up towards diabetology, gastroenterology, or even primary care. So what we did at E-Scopics was really to try and find a way to create these quantitative tools based on ultrasound to go to primary care and screen for steatosis in the liver, but also fibrosis, which is then raising an even more important issue. And what we've created is called Hepatoscope. It's a software product, even though it is an ultrasound system. And what we target is the use by primary care and diabetologists of this tool just to basically screen the liver and seeing the liver for a patient is also helping the patient trying to appropriate himself the disease. I mean, he sees the effect that the drug can have on his liver, and this I think is potentially going to help also the compliance and to drugs. So that's what we do. We of course talk a lot about the liver, but this is an ultrasound system. We can also look at the fat. I was very interested this morning in the discussion around the monitoring of fat. We can actually look at the subcutaneous fat with ultrasound. And because we have quote unquote imaging biomarker, we kind of estimate parameters from ultrasound that can either be associated with fibrosis, steatosis, we said that, but potentially also inflammation. And I think trying to get to parameters that can inform about the kind of fat that you have or inflammation could also be an important aspect to monitor during treatment.
So I think one thing we've heard today quite a lot is, the breadth and depth of this disease. And now we keep hearing, there's a billion people living with obesity. Well, I would actually challenge that. I think there's 2 billion people living with excessive weight. And from my point of view, the market, and we've heard, is a huge, huge market. And it's going to segment. But we keep ignoring, I think, from my point of view, potentially the elephant in the room, which is, why are we waiting until individuals are hitting the obese category in order to start treating them? We know that all of these comorbidities, cardiometabolic comorbidities, they don't start when your BMI hits 30. These are chronic diseases. They start as soon as your weight becomes excessive for you. And for some people, that might be a BMI of 23. For some people, that might be a BMI of 25. So I think we need to sort of step back from this and sort of look at this market and say, what does an individual need at a different point in their life? And therefore, we should be monitoring people's weight, particularly as they age. We know that aging is a huge predisposing factor to obesity and excessive weight. And we should be intervening earlier with risk-appropriate treatments, toleration profiles. We should be ensuring that the right people have the right access to the right treatments. And when it's 2 billion people, this isn't one drug or even one class of drug that is going to be able to really be a panacea. There's no such thing. It's multiple, it's dozens of tools stretching across pharmacotherapy, medtech, AI, diagnostics. All of these holistic treatments need to come together. And from my point of view, in terms of the investment, the people who are top of their game with the best technology really answering those questions and helping those individuals across all those areas are the ones that are going to succeed.
Thank you, Camilla. I think obesity has always been there, right? But now there is like much more evidence on what are all the associated costs, and I'm not only talking about the monetary costs, but there's much more attention into also health issues that are associated. They've always been there, they've always been known. It's now they're more quantified, and so prevention could be an attitude that wasn't so much before. So it's like the kind of disruption that's coming along with this drugs approval that will change behavior, probably payers' behavior in first place. So, well, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think related to that, perhaps, and maybe you are at the forefront. How do you think about? We're trying to solve a lot for, say, there's awareness, but also for compliance. I think it's quite relevant. What are the limitations of compliance? And then perhaps you may touch upon it, and then maybe Shaheen can go a little deeper. How do you see digital engagement and monitoring sort of going up to that compliance and making sure that there is a possible solution to this? And then maybe related, and Claude, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how non-invasive diagnostic, including your devices, solving those challenges as well. So maybe Camilla first, what do you think are the limitations of compliance, particularly as we are trying to solve this big problem?
I think the last panel actually spoke about this very well. I think there are many issues when we're talking about compliance. The obvious ones are, of course, tolerability at the moment. Although this is a huge market, actually we've not got that many treatments available, and they're all of the same essential ilk. And so we're seeing the same issues coming through. And so, of course, tolerability is a massive part of that, but as is cost, particularly here in the US. I think when, again, we've got this huge problem affecting hundreds of millions of people in the Western world who are the predominant users at the moment, you cannot have the cost base that we have if we want to be treating them. And so that actually is a problem with compliance. So someone might say, okay, I have $6,000 that I can spend on this, but I can't spend $1,000 for the rest of my life on this. I have to have another option that's going to sustain. And then if you know that your weight's coming back on, which we now do as soon as you stop treatment, you really want to plan ahead of that. You've got to say, okay, I'm going to use this as an induction therapy, but what can I off-ramp onto? Maybe not because it's a tolerability issue for some individuals. It could understandably be cost. We know that in the UK, for instance, we have 500,000 people paying for GLP-1s out of pocket. There is no other disease in the UK where people are paying out of pocket at that level. It doesn't exist. This is a brand new area. And so this is a real consideration. I think it's cost and tolerability, and those are two things we have to solve.
Great. Now let me piggyback off of that. Compliance, and I see it more in the lens of engagement, right? So compliance is maybe in your trials that have to comply with a protocol, and then they face the real world, which is much more complex than studies. It's engagement. And when I look at a patient in front of me in a clinic setting, I recommend a variety of drugs, procedures, injections, surgeries, lifestyle modifications, referrals to therapies. Why does that person choose to follow my recommendations? Well, it comes down to the therapeutic alliance. They feel that I have a shared interest in their goals. And if they take a series of steps, they could reasonably achieve that shared goal. And then there's trust, rapport, bond, and everything else. There actually is a validated instrument to measure the therapeutic alliance using digital solutions, and that's called the Digital Working Alliance. So what we do at Click Therapeutics is build our applications in the very first weeks to deepen that relationship and find out what their motivations are and their levers are and what are their pain points, and then build in that experience. A drug is a passive act, right? It doesn't take into account why you want to take this or why you should take this or even influence itself and modulate itself. That's why I think when the drug adds a smart technology like digital therapeutic, you could achieve maximum engagement because they're almost accountable now to this therapy.
And Claude, perhaps, how do you think not diagnostic or non-invasive monitoring, to Shaheen's point?
Yeah, so I would say that compliance for a drug that is supposed to help you lose weight would seem obvious. I mean, when you lose weight, you can see that. I think what we were trying to address was trying to have the patient be sensitive to how his or her liver benefits from the therapy, because you rarely see your liver. And I think that the example that I would take is is the example of a patient that was a liver transplanted patient that we imaged one day on a booth at a conference, and seeing the liver, seeing the brightness of the liver on her ultrasound image was actually relating her to her liver. And I think seeing the results, obviously losing weight is something you can see, but seeing the results of your liver with parameters that improve, with the level of steatosis decreasing, the level of fibrosis decreasing, is something that can help the patient relate to her or his disease to some extent. And that's what we try to provide, a way for a patient to relate to the organ that is at stake. We believe that, of course, today we have a transducer that a nurse can use anywhere. We are not supposed to have the patient do the exam itself, but we all know the evolution of ultrasound with patches that are being designed to stitch on someone's body, and and that already starts to exist for cardiovascular issues. And we strongly believe that these imaging biomarkers with ultrasound could one day be ported onto patches that will allow a patient to follow the treatment, basically, because at the end of the day, what you want is to see early changes in a given condition when you are under treatment.
Thank you. Well, and I also assume that the non-invasiveness allows much more frequent, right, monitoring, and patients would be happier soon, especially for fat liver and NASH and that this kind of disease, which are more difficult to monitor their engagement. But coming to that, I mean, these patients, they have a number of overlapping conditions most of the time, right? They have diabetes, they're obese, they have fat liver, and they're gonna somehow have to kind of follow a treatment flow. And I mean, as investors, obviously, we want to be where the largest volumes are. That's always the key question. And this is something that is, because this is changing so fast, we are completely unclear what comes first, in who treats that patients for which one of the condition first, and where are the volumes. So do you have any thought, I mean, any guidance on that, on who gets the patient first, and eventually where will be the big volumes going on? Because we assume a patient will not look for treatment at the same time for the three conditions, and or maybe, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you have an idea?
I think this actually comes back to what I was saying a bit before, but we've now, 5 years ago, I think, if I asked everyone in this room, put your hand up if you think obesity is a disease, not many people would put their hand up. I think if I asked that question right now, I really hope everybody would put their hand up and say, yes, obesity is definitely a disease. And what I think that means is, that's fantastic. We've got education going on across the world and across the sector. And so when you ask who should see the patient first, it should be primary care, in my opinion. Again, we cannot have tertiary healthcare looking after these individuals, certainly on a population health scale. Of course, the individuals with complex comorbidities absolutely need to be in the right in the right specialty. But again, the first people that should be being treated for this are people who haven't developed comorbidities. We should be getting, if at all possible, potentially pre-diabetes or sort of pre-cardiovascular disease. As we're monitoring bloods, as we're monitoring people's weights, we should be saying, actually, we need to intervene now, because if your weight continues on this projection, and that's pretty well actually established, particularly again with age and different individuals. We can intervene earlier and say, you never need to develop type 2 diabetes. In fact, we can probably stop you getting to MASH or MAFOLD. And so the first indication should be before we've even got to these comorbidities.
healthy patient, basically. But you're absolutely right, just at the very beginning. But I fully agree.
I fully agree with that. And I think that primary care should have an essential role in screening, following, but even for prevention, because I could very well foresee that primary care doctor, in the same manner that he measures weight or any other parameters or blood pressure, would one day look at the liver, would one day look at the compliance, the vessel compliance. It should become routine practice, routine parameters that he's looking at, just in order to follow a patient and screen as early as possible. But even when the chronic disease is engaged, follow up, because we all know that unlike acute disease, chronic disease are disease that needs to be managed, and you need regular visits and you need regular exams, and this is not something that a radiologist can do. You need to have the tool available at the primary care level to do this.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to disagree that primary care should manage these complex diseases as they do now. But frankly, my response is any opportunity they get to any clinician, be it physician, nurse, or whoever. And I think it's more about flipping the switch and empowering the patient to recognize that they are at risk, right, for an activity early on. So these are the tools that we're generating, but obviously that has to warrant a prescription or scripts, because these are not solutions without risk and tolerability issues. So as long as we design some sort of system of a safety net screening, empowering patients, and then triggering prescriptions, I do think that's the solution. But it doesn't matter if it's primary care, specialty care, their psychiatrists should be addressing their obesity issues. Absolutely, yeah.
There's one thing about giving a tool to a primary care doctor, though, because he's not a specialist in imaging. And I want to come back to a remark that we had this morning, where imaging was associated to an expensive tool. Yes, of course, MRI is an expensive tool, and there's no way a primary care would do MRI. But there have been a lot of companies in ultra-portable ultrasound trying to penetrate primary care. And they do it with some success. The main barrier to entry, however, is image interpretation. And I think at E-Scopics, what we are really trying to do by improving the algorithms with which we do imaging is to create imaging, quote-unquote, biomarker, quantitative imaging tool that do not need interpretation. And today, when we give a number of liver stiffness to a primary care, he should know, because there are literature about this, that each level of stiffness of the liver is equivalent to that amount of fibrosis. If we give an information about the brightness of a liver, he would perfectly understand the steatosis level. And if we give him a number about the elasticity of an artery, he should know whether the artery is stiffening and whether there's a risk of hypertension potentially developing. So I think the key for us, at least, or the vision that we had, was that quantitative imaging has to be the way to ease the adoption by primary care about an imaging tool.
And reimbursement. I mean, reimbursement obviously will also play an important role, whatever is will allow to make more money for, but the sector will have priority. So it's kind of changing while we speak, right? So we'll see where the volumes will go. Now, drugs, they're taking the lead, kind of, right? But anything that's medtech, and it's less for a diagnostic player. It's more for solutions like the one you're developing, Camilla and Shaheen. Do you guys feel you're competing with the drugs, or you gonna be kind of associated, complementing the drugs? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I very much think this is about complement therapy. This is about having the right tools in the armory to treat multiple individuals. So I do not, certainly from our perspective, what we're trying to do, I don't see us going head to head with the drugs. From the readout that we've had in our phase 2, we have phenomenal safety profile and good solid weight loss, but it's going to be somewhere around 10, maybe 12% at the year mark, but phenomenal safety with our preclinical almost zero toxicity. And so we are really solving a different solution to the 20% individuals who are receiving 20% weight loss, say on tirzepatide, but they're also getting diarrhea and vomiting and nausea and other more serious actual complications. And so, the areas that we have identified that we are specifically uniquely developed to really dominate in is in that overweight space, because it's a risk-benefit profile. So FDA actually came back to us, they've seen our clinical data, and they said, should your data continue to be as safe as you're showing us, we'll give you an indication for use of BMI 25 and over, no comorbidities. And that's a reflection of that safety profile. And actually, if you've got a BMI of between 25 and 27, you don't need to lose 20% of your weight loss. In fact, it's dangerous because of the muscle mass that inherently comes with that level. And so again, it's having the right therapies for the right individuals. And so then the other area is in that weight maintenance. And we know that these drugs do seem to be pretty safe long term. So even with that aside, it comes down to that cost and that tolerability, and potentially we are seeing some refractory cases, giving physicians the tools with therapies with a very different mode of action. So from my point of view, we're totally non-pharmacological, so we can be married up with any pharmacological solution. So if you have a patient that's becoming refractory to treatment or needs to back off their dose escalation because they're finding the tolerability side effect too much, you could add in our therapy with absolutely no issues at all, because you know that the mode of action is completely different. You're never going to get double competing for that. So from my point of view, it's, and I think across the board, it's about having multiple tools and having this holistic therapy.
And we take an entirely different approach. I do believe in complementary therapies, and there are great solutions out there that are human-based interventions or non and scalable. The way we do it is we try to synergize with individual drugs. So in fact, we have global co-development and commercialization partnerships with pharmaceutical companies. I have one with Otsuka Pharmaceuticals and another two with Boehringer Ingelheim, largely in the CNS space. What we've recently done is acquired an assets of Better Therapeutics. It's an app that's FDA cleared for type 2 diabetes, and we even have a breakthrough device designation for an app that treats MASH based on MRI findings of fat deposits in the liver. What we do is pair that exactly with the drug. Look at the drug efficacy profile, where it hits, where it maybe doesn't hit, and we could fill in the blanks. Think about obesity. Obesity is not only now known as a disease, it's a neurobiological disease. Where are these incretins acting and amylin acting? On the brain to create early satiety, fullness, reduce appetite, right? Well, what have I developed? Well, we've developed a bunch of ways to work on those same receptors and those same circuitries in a synergistic fashion. So that way we can enhance efficacy, and safety and tolerability I think we've addressed. There's even ways for me to reduce nausea, vomiting, right? Using digital interventions with it. When you pair them together, it addresses the reimbursement concerns of digital health technologies. These are now reimbursed based on traditional pharma payers, essentially. Plus, we're showing this is not just an accessible tool or extended release formulation. We're extracting higher efficacy, safety, and tolerability. More people are staying on it, and we're collecting data not just on the primary disease obesity, but everything else: cognitive function, return to work, return to school, things that actually matter to payers. So it's a win-win-win for us, and then our pharma companies commercialize it. So I could still focus on R&D efforts. Yeah.
That's a great segue to my next question, actually. You've got an investment banker on the panel, and one of my jobs is obviously to connect people and companies and strategics with emerging technologies. How do you see strategic partnerships sort of accelerating the commercialization in what you're doing or your field? How important are they? What are the challenges, if any? And I'm sure there are plenty. And where do you see strategics coming in, particularly the larger ones coming in, pharma or even some of the larger medtech companies or diagnostics companies coming in and playing a role here?
Okay, I'll start with ultrasound. We see strategic partnerships with big medtech companies. So by medtech companies, I would focus on imaging companies, of course, as a way for us to help them penetrate the upstream of the medical chain. I mean, going into specialty care or going into primary care. In imaging, and I will take the example of ultrasound only. That's what I'm focusing on. Ultrasound. Historically, there are three markets: radiology, cardiology, and OBGYN. Cardiology and OBGYN and obstetrics are two specialists. Radiology is a multi-purpose imaging specialty. But even with the different ultra-portable devices that all these companies have developed, whether it's Siemens, Philips, GE, Canon, and so on, they've never been really successful in going into primary care because I don't think they had a good reason to go in primary care with ultrasound. With diseases such as MASH, we offer them potentially with these biomarkers that I was talking about, a way to penetrate primary care. So I think it's we could potentially bring them a market that they've always contemplated with a tool that is disrupting the conventional use of ultrasound, helping them to penetrate that. We, of course, would benefit from a brand. We would benefit from a network of service network of service of application specialists to try and distribute the device. With pharma, it's a little bit different. I think there are, and we see that today with drug companies that are close to commercialization, is it's one thing to have a drug approved by the FDA. Now, when you want to democratize the use of that drug, you have to increase the awareness and the detection of the disease. And that's why point-of-care devices to do detection is important. But even more importantly, the monitoring of the efficacy of these drugs, that when you look at the clinical trial, it's not 90% of the population that answers positively to these drugs. So monitoring early enough the changes, and for us it's the changes in fat in the liver, is extremely important. So that's how we could try and bring our tool to them.
As we're left with a little bit more than just 1 minute, I will ask you just a very short answer, but to the very last question, which is about more of financial markets and valuations. We've seen, this this year we've seen, and we've seen in the previous panel, we've seen that any drug company in obesity has done remarkably well, better than any other company on both in biotech and medtech. But what we know, it's been always the case that is that a drug company are valued in a certain way, while device companies are completely valued in a different way. So, short answer: why do you think there's this double standard? If in the end the outcome is about the same, like for you, Camilla, is weight loss, same for you, Shaheen, and monitoring and diagnosis has an effect on the therapy itself that is quite dramatic. So why do you think there's this double standard? Do you have any thought on that? Do you want to?
It's a hard one, and we only have 7 seconds, so I'll be very, very quick. I think the answer, in a nutshell, is the target addressable markets in pharma is much, much more larger, and therefore the revenues of pharma companies are much, much larger, whereas medtech is likely smaller. And that sort of explains a little bit of the differential. And if I'm going to get into a little bit more technical, I can see the negative number in there. Usually, large medtech companies are valued on top-line growth. All things being equal, higher the growth gets higher value. It's not that different for pharma companies either. Funnily enough, the the thing about pharma companies is people, and which is why you see pharma companies actually going on and buying pipeline. It's because they're actually valued much more on the longer term pipeline potential. We do keep on continuously hearing about patent cliffs for certain pharma companies. I mean, I wouldn't name them, but we all know who they are. And that's why they actually go and buy something which is going to give them revenues way down the line. Whereas for medtech companies, they generally look for commercial stage assets because they know that it's now and that they're valued simply on top line growth over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So that's the answer in a nutshell. I know we are out of time, but if anybody wants to chime in, please do.
I don't think we could top your answer because you're on that end of evaluation. Yeah, I mean, at Click, I think our last round was Series B 4 years ago, and what we've learned is we do co-development deals, right, with pharma. So they pay for technical and clinical development, and then on the back end, we have obviously milestone payments on regulatory, commercial milestones, and double-digit royalties. So we actually are teetering both worlds, essentially. So thank you. Yeah.
I'm just asking myself one question regarding this different treatment between pharma and medtech, and this has to do with technology and IP. I wonder whether the perception in the field is not that technology IP is something that you can go around easier than potentially molecule or something that can get a barrier to entry of a new drug. That's an open.
Just very, very quickly. 2 seconds.
No, Camilla, please take the question because you're the most
Well, I was going to say,
your solution is head to head with the drug. So why would that be different?
well, as I keep saying to investors that we're speaking to for our phase 3 is we're the best of both worlds. We are regulated as a medical device, which means our cost to market is much cheaper, but we literally come in a blister pack and we are a pill. So we have the therapeutic market. So really, we're the goal here.
So it's so unfair, right? That's the conclusion. So we're going to thank you, everyone here, and thank you for those who stayed with us till the end. And thank you, Sayan, for co-chairing this with me and to the panelists and S.A.S conference again. Thanks.